We're going to take another break from our Genesis study for a second week in a row. Tonight, I want us to take a look at Ecclesiastes, chapters 11 and 12. Ecclesiastes, chapters 11 and 12. We'll read most of these verses like we did last week. We'll read most of these verses, but we will skim a little. We'll skip some verses for time's sake. But I think that this study is going to be beneficial to you. I've always loved the book of Ecclesiastes, but you do have to be a little careful to understand the setting for the book when you're studying through the book. Otherwise, you're going to be confused by a lot of the statements in the book. This book was written by King Solomon at a late stage in his life, at a stage in his life where he had experimented with rebellion and we would say backsliding. And so the book is written sort of with God, for the first part of it, out of mind. In other words, this is a man seeking for the meaning of life, the purpose of life. He's seeking for happiness in life, but he's doing it in other avenues, not through the Lord. It's a good book because, you know, if you're one of those people that don't understand that true purpose, true fulfillment, true happiness in life comes from knowing your Maker and walking with your Maker, then this is a good book to read because Solomon is a guy that had unlimited wealth. So he could pursue happiness to the fullest extent at any category that he chose. And he did so, and he chronicles it for us in this book. And understanding that helps you when you come to those statements where it sounds like Solomon is basically just saying life bites and nothing matters. All is vanity. And nothing new ever happens. There's nothing new under the sun. This has all just happened over and over. We're just repeating cycles. Life stinks and then you die. But when you come to the last two chapters, it's Solomon being a good preacher and like good preachers do, bringing himself to a conclusion on this very big long sermon. And what he gives in that conclusion, that two-chapter conclusion, is extremely helpful. It's packed with just practical lessons and principles for daily life. And of course, as New Testament readers, we can read that and we can learn the practical lessons for our life and we can implement those and they will benefit us, just as you can do with the Proverbs. But it's more than that to us because we can take these things, of course, and apply them to our spiritual life. We can pull the spiritual lessons out of there, the spiritual principles out of there, and then we can walk by them. So I'm going to venture to say that I firmly believe in my heart that every single one of us, as we go down through these things we're going to learn in these two chapters, every single one of us, we're going to find at least a couple items that Solomon runs down through for us that we're going to stop and realize these are things I need to work on. I guarantee you for each person, there's at least going to be a few. For some of you, you may hear every one and say, I'm not doing any of them. I got a lot of work to do, but I guarantee you for every one of us, there's at least a handful of them here. So I hope you're a good note taker. You know, if you don't want to take notes tonight, that's fine. Listen to the message later on when it's posted. Write these things down and get them in your life. Implement them. Implement them in your personal, practical, daily life. Implement them in your prayer life. All right, so let's go down through these and see what we can learn tonight. He starts off in chapter 11 like this. Cast your bread upon the waters, for you will find it after many days. I always wondered what that verse meant. When I was young, this one really puzzled me. I'd read over this with really no access to a commentary, just a young reader. And I'd read over that and say, Lord, that makes no sense to me. Cast your bread upon the waters. But we keep something in mind here as we read. Solomon was an extremely intelligent man. How many of you know that? He is the second most wise individual to ever set foot on this planet. Who knows who number one was? Jesus himself, of course. But next to Jesus, I mean, you know, take out the God-man, and Solomon is tops. The wisest man to ever live. So when you read his words, you have to dig for some meaning. Solomon spoke in what we call proverbs. These are short, dark, meaning veiled in meaning, short, dark, powerful statements that pack a punch and have a lot of meaning behind them. I'm going to spare you the work, and I'm going to spare us the time tonight. I'm going to cut through all that, and I'm going to tell you what Solomon is saying. If you don't understand why I'm making the connections that I'm making, that's for your own study. But I'm going to try to help you out tonight. Here's what you need to know about verse 1. This was something that Solomon implemented in his life. He's making this statement as he draws from his own life experience. Solomon was a merchant trader, and he would pack up his boats and he would send those boats out, and they would be gone for months at a time as they hopped neighboring shorelines and visited different regions. And then when that ship would come back in, when Solomon's ship came in, the ship wasn't empty. He didn't lose everything he sent out on the water. He had increase when the ship came back. He gained a lot of wealth through trading, and that's what he's saying here. He's saying, cast your bread upon the waters, and after many days, after it's made some cycles, it comes back and it yields a dividend, an increase. So what he's doing is he is encouraging us to implement wise financial strategies in life, and he's encouraging us not to be afraid to invest wealth that we have right now for a future increase, a future return. It might be good for you to couple that statement with our teaching from, I believe, 2 weeks ago, when we talked about, well, actually the last 2 weeks on Sunday, where we talked about materialism, covetousness, wealth, and all those things. You might want to couple those two statements together. But hey, if your heart is right with the Lord, Solomon's saying it's a smart thing to invest for your future. Invest what you have now and get it out there. Get it working for you. Get it bringing back increase for you so that in the future you have more. And of course, that is of less significance to me than is the spiritual meaning of this. The spiritual meaning would be invest now in your eternity, invest now in spiritual things, and the harvest is going to come back full. So we would say, pray now. Invest your time in prayer. Guess what the harvest is? Answered prayer. It's wonderful. Invest now in studying the Word. Guess what the harvest is? It's a wealth of divine wisdom and knowledge. Invest in the kingdom, just like we were teaching on Sunday. Invest in the kingdom, and the increase that comes back will be an overwhelming, spiritual, abundant increase in your life. Verse 2, give a serving to 7 and also to 8, for you do not know what evil will be upon the earth. So Solomon says, don't only invest your wealth for returns. Don't just take what you have and get it out there hoping for an investment to bring back a return. But Solomon would say this, in your wealth, give stuff away too. Be generous now while you're well off, because the point that Solomon makes is a good one. If you're generous to people now, if you're feeding them now, if you're throwing abundance at people now, if you're investing in other people's lives through generosity, that could come back to be a very good thing, because you don't know what's going to happen on the earth. As Solomon says, you don't know what tomorrow's going to bring for your financial status. Next month, you don't know what your bank account is going to look like. And if you were a generous person in your prosperity, then your friends are going to remember that. The people that you were generous to, and they'll turn right back around and they'll be generous to you in your time of need. But it works the other way too. If you weren't generous in your times of prosperity, all of your quote-unquote friends that aren't really your friends because they don't like you because you're not generous, all of your friends that you held out on, all of your friends that you acted like a miser to, guess what? When you're in the poorhouse, they're not helping you either. So don't just invest for future wealth, but invest in people now. Verse 3, if the clouds are full of rain, they empty themselves upon the earth. And if a tree falls to the south or to the north, in the place where the tree falls, there it shall lie. And if you're wondering, yes, it will make a sound even if no one hears it, even if no one sees it, pardon me. That's kind of a funny statement, like wherever the tree falls, there it is. Reminds me of what my Aunt Linda told me the one time, just cracked me up the first time I ever heard it. She said, I told her where I was going, and she said, well, you know what they say, wherever you go, there you are. And that's what Solomon's saying. You know, there are things that are just going to happen. The first one is the rain. And here's the point. You know, the clouds roll in and you know the rain's coming. Solomon is speaking of inevitability. He's speaking of being able to see things and anticipate them happening. And some of those things that happen, all you can really do is prepare for it in advance and adjust to it. You're outside, you see the storm clouds moving in, you see those big, ugly, hideous gray clouds, and you know the rain is coming, and you can't stop it. You just can't stop it. So the best thing you can do is get ready for it. Go out to the store, buy yourself a rain jacket, and do what you were planning on doing anyway. The wise man and the wise woman will prepare for what they see coming ahead. When life is about to hand you a rain cloud, go get yourself an umbrella. Go get yourself a raincoat. Just get ready for it. Don't let it stop you. Prepare to weather the storm. Don't get bent out of shape by the weather. Endure the expected, Solomon is saying. Endure the expected. And then the tree thing, the falling of the tree. Here's what Solomon's saying. Don't just endure the expected, but expect the unexpected. That's something you can't predict. That's something you don't see coming. There's no advance warning when a tree falls, and wherever it falls, there it is. If it's over the top of your garden, well, that's where it is. If it's fallen across your previously very neatly manicured lawn, well, so be it. There it is. So expect the unexpected. These things are just going to happen. This is a part of life. We would just say it like this. Stuff happens. I know the world says it a little more crudely than we Christians do, but stuff just happens. Without warning, these things can come out of nowhere. And here's all you can do. Adjust and go into damage control. So when life hands you a fallen tree, go to the store and buy yourself a chainsaw. Damage control. Fix it. Don't moan and groan and mumble and complain about it. Just endure the inevitable. It's going to rain from time to time. The trees are going to fall where they're going to fall. Life is going to happen. Life is going to unfold. Sometimes expected and anticipated, sometimes unexpected. Solomon says, be ready for both. Verse 4. He who observes the wind will not sow, and he who regards the clouds will not reap. So this is especially practical for the farmer. Don't let adverse weather conditions keep you from doing what you need to do. Don't be watching your weather app and trying to decide if you're going to work, because very seldom is the weather just right. Very seldom does the sky look like it's going to be a good day for work, especially in southwestern Pennsylvania. I don't know what happened to our summers, but we get a lot of rain now. You just can't base your work ethic and your workload on what you think the weather's going to do. So just get up, get moving. Verse 5. As you do not know what is the way of the wind, or how the bones grow in the womb of her who is with child, so you do not know the works of God who makes everything. Solomon's saying, look, there's plenty of stuff that you just have no idea of how it works. There's plenty of stuff you can't see that only God sees. You don't understand. You don't see how the child grows in the womb. God does. You don't know what's behind the wind. God knows. You may get up and get out into the field ready to work, and all of a sudden the wind moves in and it looks like it's going to be bad, so you pack it up and leave. But you don't know that that wind might just completely change directions on a dime, and it'd be a beautiful day to be out there farming. So, you realize even the professional meteorologist only bats about 500 on this one. So don't put too much stock in what you think the weather's going to do. Don't wait for conditions to be just right. If you got work to do, by golly, get out there and do it. Verse 6. In the morning, sow your seed, and in the evening, do not withhold your hand. For you do not know which will prosper, either this or that, or whether both alike will be good. So don't hold back. Just as you aren't to wait for perfect weather to get out there and work, don't wait for the perfect time either. Don't get out there and plant in the morning and sow the seed and then say, oh well, good enough. I don't even know if tonight's seed sowing session would be of any benefit. I'm just going to call it a day at that. Don't do that. You don't know. That morning session of seed planting might not have accomplished you anything. None of those may have took. But it might be that evening session that if you get out there and scatter the seed in the evening session, that might be the session that takes. And better yet, as Solomon says, they both may work. And you won't regret that either. If you worked in the morning and you worked in the evening and all of that seed produced, well, praise God, then you have an abundance at harvest time. The same is true for planting the seed of the Word of God, isn't it? You ever read the Bible and at times the what you're reading is just kind of dry? You don't feel like it did anything for you? You ever hear, now I know it never happened here, but you ever hear a preacher preach and think, my goodness, this is boring. This is doing nothing for me. Well, what Solomon is saying here is you can't go by that. You may get in that morning session and be studying the Bible in that morning session. It may be dry and you may say, oh, well, I think I'll skip the evening session. I don't know. I'm just not in it. Just not in the mood, and the scriptures aren't really affecting me today. I think I'll just stay out of the Word for today. I'll get a fresh start tomorrow. Maybe it was that evening reading session in the scriptures where the Lord was really going to grab your heart and light it up with encouragement, or get your nose right to the very scripture that you needed for your life right then and right there. Maybe you think, well, I went to Sunday morning service. Arlyn was so boring, I didn't understand a word he was saying. It was like it was all Greek, and some of it was. I'm not going to Wednesday. Maybe the Wednesday teaching is the one that would really grab you, really move you, really give you direction for life. So here's what Solomon is saying. Take every opportunity that you get. Make use of every opportunity that you get to sow seed. Physically, in the field, sure. Life principle, it works. Spiritually, in the Word, spiritual principle, it works. It just works. Verse 7. Truly the light is sweet, and it is pleasant for the eyes to behold the sun. Verse 8. But if a man lives many years and rejoices in them all, yet let him remember the days of darkness, for they will be many. All that is coming is vanity. Now, ignore that last vanity section for a moment. I told you why Solomon is launching into all that. But look at a good principle that he gives us here. It's true, we all prefer sunny, beautiful, bright days. If you don't, please do not let me know. I don't even want to know. Don't raise your hand. I don't want to know. I think all of us prefer beautiful, bright, warm, sunny days. But living through the dark days and the bad weather is a necessary part of life. Solomon is showing us a picture of a man that looks back over his life. He looks back over his years and he rejoices in them. He thinks, pretty good life. But chances are he's suppressing some thoughts. Chances are he's trying to keep out of mind the dark days, the tough times. And interesting for Solomon to take us in this direction. He says, don't do that. It's kind of a straight betwixt between what Paul said about forgetting the past. And now Solomon's telling us, remember the dark days. But really there's no conflict. Because what you learn in life, if you're wise and if you're walking with the Lord and have His help, what you learn in life is that usually life's most important lessons come from life's darkest days. I've had people many times ask me, because they know some of the things that happened in my life, some of the negatives, and they've asked me, are there things in your life that you regret? If you could go back and do it all over again, would you redo some of those things? And my answer is always this: not if I lost what I learned from those experiences. I'd just rather keep them. If I could change the negative circumstances, but keep those lessons, those experiences, and those truths that I learned in the form of wisdom, then I would do that. I'd change those circumstances. I'd cover up those dark days. But if I lose the wisdom, the life experience that made me smarter, wiser, and healthier in my character, then no thank you. I'll just keep the dark days. And I think that's what Solomon is saying. You learn more in your dark days, in your tough times, than you ever could on the sunny, bright days. It's just true. Mark Twain once said that if you hold a cat by the tail, you learn things you cannot learn any other way. I mean, is that a true statement or what? And it's true for our dark days and our difficult times. It may be ugly. It may hurt like nobody's business. It may leave scars on our hearts. But you'll learn life lessons that you can't learn any other way, church. So embrace, even accept those things, those dark days, and do this, channel it into something productive. Dark days make you tough. Dark days give you strength. You need them. Verse 9, rejoice, O young man, in your youth, and let your heart cheer you in the days of your youth. Walk in the ways of your heart and in the sight of your eyes, but know that for all these, God will bring you into judgment. I like this. Very, very good saying. He says essentially this: have a good time in life, follow your heart, but don't forget God is your judge. And you'll be judged. Keep that in mind as you're living your life and following your heart. Now, this goes hand in hand with what I've taught here before. The Jeremiah 17:9 warns us about the human heart and says that the human heart, apart from God, is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? Certainly who can trust it? But then we learn in Psalm 37:4 that if you're delighting yourself in the Lord's going to give you the desires of your heart. Do you remember that teaching? Do you remember when we talked about that? Look, if my heart is not delighting after the Lord, I cannot trust it. It will lead me in the wrong direction. But if my heart is delighting in the Lord, my heart is only going to want good things that don't put me as an enemy against God. And Solomon is essentially, in his own Old Testament kind of words and thought life, trying to say the same thing. He's trying to say this: follow your heart as long as God is on your mind. I like that. If God is in your mind, you can follow your heart. If you've got judgment in mind, you can follow your heart. If you know the things that please God and you want to please God, you can follow your heart. Still be careful. It's a tricky subject. But Solomon says you can do it. Verse 10, therefore, remove sorrow from your heart. Remember we talked about how Arlyn likes to oversimplify at times? Well, Solomon just did that too. He just says this: therefore, remove sorrow from your heart. Just get rid of it. Just get rid of it. Get rid of sorrow. That's not very helpful. That's easy for him to say. That's easy for you to say, King Solomon. You don't know what I'm sorrowful over in my heart. Now, I won't say that it's easy to just get rid of sorrow. I won't say that it's easy to just boot sorrow out of your heart, but it is possible. And the reason it's possible is because the scriptures have told us to do it. This is just one occasion, but the scriptures tell us on other occasions to do it. We're given the instruction in the Bible to remove sorrow from our hearts. If it weren't possible, then the scriptures wouldn't tell you to do it. So it's possible. And I encourage you to get God's help on it. Always remember this. I've said it before. I'll say it at least probably 10 more times before I die or get kicked out as pastor and replaced with someone better. Remember this. You can change your mind, but you can't change your heart. God can change your heart, but he won't change your mind. So if you want to change your heart, you change your mind and ask God to change your heart, and God will change your heart. Did you get all that? We got it memorized? All right, it's true. We know apart from God, this statement's impossible, I think, personally. Just, okay, there's sorrow in my heart. Okay, just get over it, Arlyn. Get rid of it and move on. Okay, easy. No, I think without God, it's impossible. But when you couple together the determination of the human will and the power of the infinite God, then you got something. If you determine in your heart, Lord, I have reason to be sorrowful, I know that. And I could just be bogged down in the sorrow for the rest of my life. But here's what I want. I want to get rid of the sorrow. So I'm making the decision to get rid of the sorrow. And here I am praying for you for the dynamic I need, for the power that I need to carry that through and do the real work and change this heart and get the sorrow out of there. He also says this, put away evil from your flesh, for childhood and youth are vanity. Childhood and youth, remember where Solomon's coming from. Childhood and youth without God are useless, vain, wasted, empty, futile. 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 22, Paul said this to Timothy. He said, flee youthful lusts, but pursue righteousness, faith, love, peace with those that call on the Lord out of a pure heart. I love that remedy. He says, in this area of youthful lust. By the way, you old men, do we have any old men in here besides for me? By the way, you old men, don't think this excludes you. Don't say, well, he's speaking to the young here about youth problems, youthful lust. You're not excluded because, listen, you can be deep into life. You can be late in your years. You can be up there and almost ready to top that final hill and still be wrestling with youthful lusts, even though you're not youthful. You know how some people never grow up and mature in life? What are you guys looking at me for? We're talking about other people here. You know how some people never grow up and mature in life? Well, it's the same with righteousness and sin. Some of us never get to the point where we leave the youthful lust behind. We drag them with us all of our life. We never mature. We never grow fighting against resisting sin. So late into our life, we're still wrestling with youthful lust. What do? Well, Solomon says, put away evil from your flesh. Paul says, flee from it. Run from it, and he doesn't just say run from it indiscriminately with no aim or destination. I like what Paul does. Did you notice where Paul tries to point you to? When you're running from temptations, when you're running from youthful lust, Paul says this, get together with those who call on the Lord out of a pure heart. Get together with those people and pursue righteousness with them. I love that. In other words, you get away from the temptation, you get away from the setup where temptation could be, and you get to where people are pursuing righteousness from God together. I'd say that's anchored fellowship. You get yourself to church, you get yourself into a fellowship of believers that can help you pursue the right things, righteousness in God. For chapter 12, verse 1. Remember now your Creator in the days of your youth, before the difficult days come, and the years draw near when you say, I have no pleasure in them. I have no pleasure in what? In my days, in my years. That is, there is a specific danger that is present as we age. And Solomon is encouraging the youth to take advantage of their youth and know God in their youth and be committed to God in their youth. Take advantage of that youth, build a history with the Lord, because Solomon is saying when you age, when you get older, things are going to get difficult and you're going to need that history with the Lord. Now, I know not all of us come to the Lord early in life, but my goodness, if you can, do it. Walk with the Lord from your youth. Develop a history so that when you get old and times get tough, you have that history to fall back on. That unique danger that is present for those of us that are getting a little older. You know, anyone over 20? That unique danger is this, as Solomon listed out, it's this. It's bitterness and resentment over life. It's looking back on your life, unlike the other guy that Solomon was telling us about. It's looking back on your life and being bitter and resenting the way that your life has played out. If that happens to you, you really need a history with the Lord to be able to fall back on. Now, Solomon's words are about to get tricky. Let's see what time it is. I think we got this. His words are about to get tricky, and what he is doing is he is speaking of an individual that is growing older. Now, I know he's not using those kinds of terminology. He's painting us a picture very poetically, very picturesquely. But what he is doing is he is describing the aging process. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just buzz down through this. I'm going to tell you the meaning. If you don't understand why I arrive at what I arrive at, you can talk to me after service, or you can go and study for yourself. But I'm just going to give you the long and the short of it here, just so that we get the lessons and we get down to the end. But as we read through this section, remember Solomon's purpose. What he's trying to do is get young people to wake up and live for God to the fullest while they have their youth. What he's saying, what we're about to read is this. It's Solomon saying, this is what you have to look forward to. So dig in now while you're young, okay? Verse 3. In the day when the keepers of the house tremble. The keepers of the house tremble. What do the keepers of the house do? They clean up. They maintain. Anything that needs done in the house, they're doing it. In the analogy, that represents your legs, your arms, and your hands. Those are the things that do work. Those are the things that keep this house. If you want to do your hair, what do you need? Your hands. If you want to wash your body, what do you need? You need your hands. If you need to go to the bathroom to take care of this house, what do you need? You need your feet, right? So these are the keepers of your house, your legs, your arms, and your hands. And Solomon says, the day's coming when those legs are going to get feeble, and those knees are going to start knocking together, and those hands are going to get a little shaky. So live for the Lord, walk with the Lord, work for the Lord now while you're young, because your legs are going to give out and your hands are going to get shaky. He goes on to say, and the strong men bow down. That day is coming too when the strong men bow down. Those are the guys that carry the workload. That would be your shoulders, folks. The day's coming when you can't lug as much weight on them as you can in your youth. I always joke with Maggie and say, I can carry just about anything as long as I get it on my shoulders. I can carry 2,000 pounds if I can get it on my shoulder. But you know, as the years pass, I recognize less weight goes up there, because those shoulders begin to bow down, as Solomon says. They begin to slump and hunch, and you just don't have the strength in them like you used to. He goes on to say, when the grinders cease because they are few. That's talking about your teeth. The grinders cease because they are few. You start losing your teeth, folks. It goes on to say, those that look through the windows grow dim. You know what he's talking about here? What's the window of your soul? Your eyes. Yeah, the day's coming when your eyes grow dim. That has started already for me. Your eyesight starts to go. Man, serve the Lord while all this stuff is still working the way that it's supposed to in your body. Take advantage of that because you're going to lose your eyesight too. Verse 4, when the doors are shut in the streets and the sound of grinding is low. What's that talking about? That's talking about your ears. Your hearing starts to go. You got the doors shut and they're out there grinding at the millstone. They're doing construction work outside your house. You used to be able to hear that real good. Now, as Solomon says, your doors are shut, but the sound of the grinding is low. You're not hearing it the way that you used to. You're barely hearing it at all. Picture that, a guy outside your front door. You're in the house, he's outside your door with a jackhammer fixing a pothole. That's a hypothetical. I know that doesn't happen in PA. But he's out there with a jackhammer trying to fix that pothole, and you can barely hear that thing. But here's the perverted twist to all this. Though your hearing starts to go, and you can't even hardly hear them doing construction work outside your door, what does it say here? Reading on, it says, when one rises up at the sound of the bird, at the sound of a bird. I can't see, my eyesight's gone. I can't read real good tonight. Let me try that again. When one rises up at the sound of a bird, you understand what just happened? You're losing your hearing. Your hearing's not good, but get this. When you get older, and at 4 a.m., that bird lets out a little tweet. Guess what? Those ears that don't work real well somehow hear that, and now you're up for the rest of the day. You might as well put coffee on. The point is you're not sleeping as well as you used to, and though your hearing's bad, the slightest noise wakes you up at night, and it gets worse. Watch this. And all the daughters of music are brought low. Turn that music down. Why does that music have to be so loud? Why is the worship team louder to you, or is it just me? Why does the worship team have to be so loud? See what happens as we age? Though our hearing's bad, we hear well at night, it wakes us up, we're up for good. And suddenly things that weren't loud to us before is loud to us now. The worship team's too loud. Turn the worship team down. Reading on, it says, also they are afraid of height and of terrors in the way. It's a terrorizing thing to have to walk up to the top of that step stool to reach up into that cabinet for those Cheerios. No way, no way. You just get to the age where no way I'm going up on that stool because there's a chance I fall and break my hip, right? These are all things that are coming for you youth. Some of us laugh at these because we know them, we're experiencing. Some of you have no idea what we're talking about, but these things are true. And they're coming to a theater near you. They're coming to your life. He goes on to say this. When the almond tree blossoms, you know what happens when an almond tree blossoms? There's a beautiful white covering over that tree. Solomon says that's what's coming to your head. You're going to have a beautiful white covering on your head if you make it that far with your hair intact. Some of us never got there, but it's coming. That white head is coming. It goes on to say the grasshopper is a burden. Things that did not bug you before suddenly bug you now. You used to, as a kid, chase them around and play with them, and now they're just an annoyance. As you age, you get a little more irritable. I'm not talking about anyone apart from me here. These are things I recognize in my own life. He goes on to say, and desire fails. And I'll just leave that one at that and move on. Verse 6, remember your Creator before the silver cord is loose. That's your spinal cord. Your back's going to start to bow. And the golden bow is broken. That's your brain, folks. One day your brain is not going to work like it does now. One day your memory isn't going to work like it does now. Or the pitcher shattered at the fountain. There's no ginger way to say this. This is speaking of the pending future need to wear depends. Or the wheel broken at the well. That's the heart. That's the pump that gets the blood where it needs to go, just as that wheel gets the water where it needs to go. Verse 7. Then the dust will return to the earth as it was, and the spirit will return to God who gave it. Do you understand what he just said? Here's all these horrible things that are going to happen to you when you grow old, and then you're going to die. Then you're going to return to dust. That's what you have to look forward to, youth. Encouraging, huh? So what's with all this? Why go through all of this? I mean, why does the old age thing have to happen anyway? Why do all these things have to happen? Look, I think it's just the Lord understanding that our time is limited. It's part of the curse, but I think also it really aids us to start looking for heaven. Start expecting heaven. As our bodies wear out, as we begin to lose that vibrancy and youth and health, we just begin to realize, I'm not cut out for this world. I can't stay here forever. And it gets us longing for heaven. It gets us looking for heaven. It gets us preparing for heaven. So what's the point with all of this? That's what all of Solomon's readers want to know by the time they get to this point. But Solomon, inspired by the Spirit to write, anticipates that question and gives us a wonderful, whopping conclusion. He says this, verse 13. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. This is Solomon's deduction after everything from this book. After every avenue from which he sought pleasure, fulfillment, and purpose. Trying to find the meaning in life, trying to be happy in life. Here's Solomon's deduction. He says this, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is man's all. For God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil. I know that sounds just like servitude, and it sounds dry, and it sounds empty. But again, this is an Old Testament take on something that's beautiful. He says, fear God, reverence, deeply revere and respect God, and keep his commandments. That's a negative. That's a burden. That's a weighty thing, we might say. But it's not, because Jesus took those commandments in the New Testament. And what did he say about the commandments? He said you can sum up all of the commandments with two things: love God and love people. So when we look at what Solomon is really saying, he's saying this: here's man's all. Here's what man is designed for. Here's where man will find happiness. That goes for a woman too. We're talking about mankind. Here's where mankind will find happiness, fulfillment, health in life. It's this: revering God and loving him enough to keep his commandments. I think where we get love wrong sometimes is we love people the way we think that they need to be loved, instead of loving them the way that they need to be loved. Husbands and wives getting in trouble with that. If I love my wife the way that I want to be loved, I may be loving her in the wrong way. She may need to be loved in a completely different way. I need to know her. I need to examine her. I need to really understand her so that I can love her the right way. God has given us the right way to love him. He's told us how to love him. Here's how you love God. You keep his commandments. Now listen, just in closing here, we're done. Surely, of all of the things we just buzzed down through in lightning speed, surely you can find something that we covered today that you're not implementing in your spiritual life. I guess there's at least a couple things. Did you find them? Were there a couple things? Were there a lot of things? Listen, I'm going to read back through these keys, these points, these lessons, these truths, and I want you to just pick some things, grab onto them with your heart, and take them out of those doors with you tonight when you leave. Number one was this: invest in your future well-being. Number two, invest in the present well-being of others. Remember, be generous. Number three, endure the expected. And then number four was expect the unexpected. Number five, don't let adverse conditions stop your productivity. Number six, make the most of all opportunities. Number seven, learn from the dark days. Number eight, follow your heart with God in your mind. Number 9, keep your heart free from sorrow. Number 10, run away from youthful lusts. Number 11, in old age, lean back on your rich history with the Lord. And number 12, above all, fear God, love God with all you've got. Let's close. Would you stand with me? And we'll close in a word of prayer.